Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sobriety and Everything Else. My name is Eric Andrew. I am your sobriety coach and host for today's show. Actually, I'm always the host for the show. Anyway, I'm coming to you live from my studios, in my bedroom, in my dining room. Yes, in my dining room. We spare no expense on this podcast. So there you have it. Today is episode number 22. Wow, 22. Today we're going to talk about spirituality in sobriety, and actually spirituality in everything, right? One of the things obviously I call the show Sobriety and Everything Else. So yes, part of, or maybe the main focus is about sobriety and recovery, but the other part is about everything else. And everything else is really what makes us who we are, how we are human in this world, and how we now, as sober people, can tap into that humanity and be a part of the world on so many different levels. One being our religion or spirituality approach to our lives and who we are as people. So before I go any further, I do want to say this about this episode. This is not to have anybody think that they need to act or be a certain way or a different way. I am not at all trying to tread on anybody else's belief system, nor am I trying to tell anybody what they should be doing or how they should be believing, what is right or wrong, what is better or worse. It's not about any of that. This is my experience in my life with spirituality and religion. So I will tell you a really brief story about my journey with it and how it kind of came before the whole sobriety thing. So the whole chicken and the egg thing, right? Did the chicken come first or the egg come first? So for me, did spirituality start coming first, or did my sobriety trigger my spirituality? So there's a lot of ways to look at that, and I will try to take us through it fairly quickly so we can get to kind of the point I want to make today. So let's see. Let's go back. Let's go back about a year and a half before I decided to get sober. So 7.5 years ago. 7.5 years ago, I was turned on to a book called The Power of Now, written by Eckhart Tolle. I will put that in the notes. In fact, I will write that down. Tolle. I'm going to have a lot of things in the notes for you. So if you want to look any of it up, or if you want to check out the books, you can. So Eckhart Tolle is how do I put who he is? He's kind of a self-help guy, I guess, in general terms, but he talks a lot about the power of being in the present moment. It comes from a kind of a Buddhist tradition in terms of how he talks about it, but he doesn't really lock into Buddhism. He kind of keeps it very open-ended, very westernized, in the sense of, being in the present moment does not necessarily mean you're practicing Buddhism or that you're practicing anything. It just means you're learning how to practice being in this moment right now. Now, whether that's through meditation or whether it's just through your own practice of being present on a daily basis, it doesn't matter. So what this did was really open my eyes to, it was kind of like this aha moment, it was pretty cool, to be honest with you. And the lead up to that is, in my own journey with religion and spirituality, I ran into a wall. My father was Catholic, so not because he told me to, I made the choice to become Catholic myself. Was really into it for a while, even to the point where I had people like priests talking to me about, maybe you should consider the priesthood and all that kind of stuff, which was never something I was interested in. I did want to dive more into the idea of spirituality and what all that meant, but I wasn't really sure I wanted to go there with it, meaning become, a priest or a monk or anything on that level. So as time went on, and life went on and experiences in life went on, I started to lose a lot of my faith. I started to feel like it wasn't serving me in the way that I wanted it to. And it just felt dull. It didn't feel like I was getting much out of it. I felt like I was going through the motion of the practice. And in my mind, I felt like, well, if I'm only going through the motion of this, what am I really getting out of this? Is this really doing me any good? And in the midst of that, I still had all kinds of questions about life and all kinds of questions about why things were happening and what was going on in my life and why I was acting or reacting to things that were happening. What did I have control over? What did I not have control over? What should I accept? What should I not accept? I mean, all these things were going on. So I kind of went on a little bit of a quest. And I met a guy. We were working on a show together. He was I shouldn't say was, he is a very religious person, and invited me to come to his Christian church. So I went to that church and I tried to go consistently for a while. It was a little bit of a drive for me, but I did try to go fairly consistently just because I figured that was the only way I was really going to get a sense of, was this for me or not for me? And then there was a moment in the church where the preacher, the minister, got up and was talking about something. I don't even remember what exactly it was. And he started to work at crying. And I say work at crying, meaning he had to stand there for a minute to work into it. Now I'm a theater person and I've taught acting and things like that. And to me, it looked like he was acting. It looked like he was trying to cry for a feeling that he wanted the congregation to feel. And I felt really, really turned off by that. And I felt if that's what religion is about, then I don't want to be a part of it. Now again, just a side note, this is my experience, not yours. So please don't say I'm bashing religion. I'm not. I'm telling you what I went through. And I remember walking out of there feeling defeated, actually, not angry, just defeated. Like, is there any real connection that I can make in this whole kind of idea or quest to really kind of figure out who I am and where I belong and what do I need to be doing? And how do I connect to God if there's a God and all of that kind of stuff. So there came a time where I just kind of stopped going at all. And I wasn't going really anywhere. Every now and again, I would pop into the Catholic Church because I knew the process. But I wasn't feeling anything. I just was going through the motions. And then that book came along and I read the book. And not that the book turned me on to spirituality, but it turned me on to a way of looking at life that I'd never thought about before. A way of life of just being present, allowing myself to feel what was happening around me in that moment, whatever the moment might be, whether it was a situation at work or whether it was a situation in a friendship, whether it was a situation, hiking, what was it? What did happen? It came to be as simple as taking a walk and noticing flowers and how beautiful they are and how intricate they are in terms of what they look like, and being in awe of just that process of nature, that idea of nature, and starting to notice things like that, really starting to connect in to this world that we live in. And that was in itself, pretty amazing. And so, obviously I took that in. And in all of that, I decided to try to get into meditation and doing more with meditation. So the idea of calming my mind, calming my breath, getting grounded was really appealing to me. I was going through a really tough time emotionally at that moment in my life. This kind of does tie into the recovery world, the beginning of it, because I was going through the process of getting through that DUI, that last DUI that I had before I went into recovery. So I was going through that process, and that was difficult. And I was really trying to teach myself how to stay present and be in the moment that I was in, and to just allow things to be what they were and not try to fight against them. And that was a big step for me because I always wanted things to be perfect. that was the way that I kind of ran my life from the time I was young enough to recognize that that's what I thought, that's what people wanted. And when things were not perfect, I did everything in my power to try to change that trajectory and make them into a perfect moment, which is virtually impossible. You can't do that. It just doesn't work that way. So that's what I was really looking for in meditation. I started out in meditation just listening to guided meditations on Insight Timer, which is another thing I will put in the notes. It's an app that you can get for free on your phone or wherever you want to have it, and they have a lot of different kind of guided meditations. They offer some things for new people that might be interested in meditation. It's a great way to start if you have any interest. And even if you're curious, is a great way to start, because there's nothing that you have to do. You can just listen. And they have like minute-long or 2-minute-long meditations, so you don't really have to take up a lot of your time to decide whether, hey, this seems to be something that could work for me. So anyway, there's one. There's another one called Calm. So I'll throw both of those into the notes at the bottom if you're interested in checking those out. But then I got into then I wanted to get more deep into the meditation world. So I had heard about Transcendental Meditation, which was something that was kind of a big thing and was taking on a little bit more of a life of its own for a while there, and had been around though for quite a while. Had been around since the 60s. And basically, Transcendental Meditation is using a mantra to go into meditation. So they give you a word or a phrase that you say to yourself as you are meditating. So it's part of the meditation. It's what you focus on. You focus on that mantra as you're talking. And honestly, mantras work. Now there's other you can look into then hopefully I'll remember it off the top of my head. Vedic Meditation, which is part of one of the schools within Buddhism. Vedic, I think it's VEDIC, Vedic Meditation, and it uses a mantra as well. And the reason I bring both of those up is Transcendental, to get involved with them, you have to pay money to get involved. With Vedic meditation, you're not paying anything, and it's a old traditional way of meditating. So using a mantra in your meditation, I like the mantra. I think the mantra idea works really well, and I did pretty well with the Transcendental. But then, as everything else, I kind of was like looking for something more, and kind of got away from it for a while, and everything else. And then I moved into more of a traditional Buddhist meditation. That's kind of where I'm at now. And I'm practicing right now to be a teacher in Buddhist meditation, which I think I might have said in the last episode, and learning a lot more about Buddhism. Now, you might be saying to yourself, oh, here we go. He's going to start talking about why we should be Buddhist monks or why we should study Buddhism as a religion. No, because I personally, again, this is me. I'm not speaking for everybody else. This is me. I do not look at Buddhism as an actual religion. I look at Buddhism more as a practical way of spiritually getting to a place of understanding of who I am in this world that we have. My essence or my spirit, digging deep down into that part of me and finding out who that is. Because in my mind, that's the beginning of everything. The beginning and end of everything is that spirit. In my mind, it's in that spirit that we find God, that we find connection to this realm, the spirit realm of that world, of a godlike world. This is where we find answers to why we're here, what's going on, and I'm sure many of you have really had those thoughts before, like, well, what am I doing here? What is the purpose that I'm here? And spirituality is really based in that. So I want to read, I should have did this first, but I want to read a couple of things for you just to kind of give you a little sense of where this is all coming from. So I'm going to give you a definition, an AI definition from Google about religion. Okay. Belief in a worship of a superhuman power greater than ourselves. And I bring up that because of AA, with a God or with a God, a particular system of faith or worship. So think about religion. Think if you are a religious person and you go to church or you go to synagogue or anything, think about all the steps that you do, all the practices that you use in that faith and in how you practice that faith. That's what they're talking about, right? So keep that in mind, religion, and then let's look at spirituality. Spirituality, a quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul, search for ultimate or sacred meaning, a search for self or purpose, make sense of one's own interdimensional or interdimensions. This may include God. It may not. I'm not going to say it doesn't or doesn't need God. I think it gives you maybe again, this is my perception and my experience. I feel like it's giving me a better perception of what God is in this world. What is God in this world, and even a bigger perception of where to find that. And I know in my own practice of Catholicism, there's many times in the stories of Jesus and everything where they talk about, I will always be with you, meaning inside of you. Even if I'm not here, I am with you. Well, how does that happen if that doesn't mean that they're in us and in part of us, if he's not with us? So if that is remotely true, whether we as a religion believe in that or we're searching for a belief and we've bought into that belief. So if that's the case, then what spirituality does is brings you to that place, brings you to that place of spirit where, again, if you believe in a God, that's where you would find God. All right. And I don't even want to say him at all. And again, I'm not trying to annoy people here, but because I don't know what spirit on that level in regards to God is. I believe that we give God human form partly due to the fact that we have this concept of Jesus coming to earth as a human. But I also think it makes it easier to explain to people if we give God human form. But I don't know if God has human form. Again, please, I'm not trying to upset you. I'm not trying to get a bunch of people storming the barricade here and, screaming and yelling at me that I'm, ripping down religion. I am not. I'm not at all. I'm just simply trying to understand the question of it. And for me, spirituality, this idea of understanding myself through meditation and present moment is allowing me to get closer to that answer, closer to that idea of what it is. So what does all this mean in terms of recovery? What is all of this? Well, so let's zip kind of over to the idea of sobriety. So what are some things that we learn in sobriety early on that kind of play around with this idea of going deeper, of getting into who we are as people? I'll give you one to start with. The first one that I always think of is the idea of space. So in sobriety, we talk about space. And there's a lot of other teachers, a lot of other writers that have talked about the concept of space. And when we talk about space here, we're talking about the idea from the in between the idea of being triggered and the idea of the actual thing that we're thinking about. There's this space in between. So if you think about when you were drinking and maybe when you got angry or frustrated over something and you went directly to the bar and started drinking. And when you think back to those particular moments, you might be thinking, well, I really didn't think about that. I mean, I was pissed and it just made sense to go to the bar and drink. So there wasn't any real thought process happening like, well, why am I doing this? In recovery, we talk more about that space of why am I doing this? So reaction or having this stimulus happen, this anger towards our boss or this frustration with somebody in our lives or whatever it might be, to the actual getting to the stimulus, the thing that we're looking for to solve it. In our case, the drink. There's this place that we can spend some time in. So in that place is the question: why am I about to do this? What's going to happen when I do this? Is there a better choice for me to make? Do I want to make a better choice? All of these things are part of that space. And if we can find that space and be part of that space, we can teach ourselves to, or help ourselves not to react. We'll be better responders to moments in our lives than reacting to situations in our life. That space is also where meditation lives. Meditation is in that space. When we can let go of thought, when we can just be in a moment and allow ourselves to be in that moment, that space. And learning about space and doing that is super important in the idea of recovery. Now, does that mean that you're a meditator if you're in recovery, or does that mean you're buying into the concept of Buddhism, or does that mean you're, buying into this idea of present moment? Or no, it doesn't have to mean that at all. It just means that tool of space you're using to help keep yourself sober. That's all it means. For me, it meant more than that because I was already in the idea of meditation. I was already living in that idea. So when space came up, it made total sense to what I was already doing. Okay, that makes sense because I kind of do that with meditation. Oh, that's kind of what that is giving myself a chance to really think about what am I about to do and how is that going to affect me, in the end result. And so that worked for me really well. And I just found that an easy process to deal with. Another thing is that we learned in early sobriety as a tool is play to take forward. So the idea of, and this can actually happen within space as well. So playing to take forward, the idea of, okay, I'm triggered. I want to go have a drink, but what's going to happen when I have that drink? Am I just going to go and have one drink? For most of us, that answer is nope. It never was one drink. So if I play the tape forward from there, what's going to happen? And then you kind of see it play out, the night play out, right? You're going to sit there till 10, 11 o'clock. You may not eat. You'll just drink. And then you'll get out. Maybe you'll go to a bar. Maybe you'll get in trouble with the law. Maybe you'll just wake up with a really bad hangover and not be able to go to work. It could be, or a bunch of other things I can't come up with right now. So those things, that idea of playing the tape forward, so kind of thinking about what's going to happen down the road if I do this, is all part of this idea of space, is all part of this idea of what meditation is. And so when we talk about this in sobriety, it makes a lot of sense. The other part of sobriety that was part of at least my world of sobriety was this idea of nature, of getting out into nature and realizing that connection that we have with nature. I remember the guy that was running the program that I was a part of used to talk a lot about just get out in nature, take your shoes off and let your feet stand on the grass and just feel the grass underneath your feet. And the idea was just to get a sense of that you're part of all of that's not separate from you. You are part of that. And how important it is to understand that you are part of the bigger picture. You are not just viewing from the outside the picture. You are part of that picture. And that was so powerful for me and so important to me. So all those things in sobriety help to really fuel my search in spirituality, where I wanted to go with spirituality, what I wanted to learn more about. And I really wanted to learn more about what is our place in this big world that includes nature, that includes, our thoughts, that includes our feelings, that includes body and mind, which is a big part of what I wanted to kind of get at with all of this. We come into sobriety being thinkers. We think about everything. Why, right? Why this? Why that? Why did that happen? Why is this so hard? Why is my life suck? Why? right? And all that comes from here. We get into sobriety, and if we're successful with sobriety, we bring everything from here into here. So both places now start to work together in this body that we have as a vessel where our spirit lives. So we start to use both our body and our minds to figure things out. You've heard of that sixth sense, right? You've heard of that gut reaction. How many of us, when we were not sober, talked about, oh, my gut told me not to do it, but I did it anyway. And man, if I would have listened to my gut, things would have been better. How many of us have talked about that? I have. And I'm sure some of you have as well. And how many of us now really pay attention to what our bodies are telling us about certain situations, certain things that are going on, and we allow our body to have a vote, right? Part of the process. If you want to say there's three people going on there, your consciousness being one, your brain being two, and your body being three. So three people are voting. And, what is the vote? And hopefully the vote all three agree with. And if we listen to the body, we might find that at the very least, it might be 2-1. The brain might be telling us something else, but maybe our conscious and our body are telling us something else. Many times, if we listen to our bodies are usually more right than our brains are. Our brains like to intellectualize things. Our brains like to try to figure things out and analyze things. The analyzation of things does not always mean it's right. It just means that we have the ability to think things through and categorize things and do all that kind of good stuff. So it's very important that the body and the mind are part of this process of getting sober and also this process of living life. So for me, all of that comes to fruition in things like meditation, in things like yoga, in things like staying in the present moment. These are all things that are super important to me in being successful with my own sobriety and starting to become more successful within my own life. Again, this was not to try to sway any of you to believe any of this. You could say, this is a bunch of garbage. Thanks, Eric, but I'm not listening anymore. Or you could go, oh, all right, well, maybe I could check that out. Maybe that makes some sense for me in my life. The one thing I learned in sobriety, if anything else, was to at least be open to things, at least be willing to try. So trying might be that you get the Insight Timer app. It's free. You listen to a couple of guided meditations and you make your decision from there. Or the Calm app. Again, that's another one that has a free version of it. Or you get a book and you read, Eckhart Tolle's book and you read The Power of Now. Or you read other people that are out there being successful that use meditation as part of their success story. Whether they're successful in recovery or whether they're just successful in life. There's a lot of people that use meditation and they're not necessarily in recovery. They are just success in life. Listen to enough podcasts. You will find many of the podcast hosts are people that meditate, that practice on that level. All right. So anyway, I wanted to talk a lot about that. I did talk a lot about that today. I hope some of this made some sense. I would love to hear from some of you. Please reach out to the podcast through this site on YouTube, or send me an email. Let me know what you're thinking. My email is ericandrewcoaching12@gmail.com. That's ericandrewcoaching12@gmail.com. Or just send a message through the message system here on YouTube, and I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you very soon. Peace.